Hey, welcome to Make It Happen. Today we have a fascinating conversation with Cheryl Johnson, all about how to be an informed community member and how to gather together with others to solve problems that may be prevalent in your area or to meet specific needs. Today's episode is really interesting and unique, and so I hope that you'll stay tuned and learn and glean the wisdom and advice of Cheryl. Also, in Pick My Brain, I'm answering questions about how and when to use hashtags, and my favorite things is all about holidays. Welcome to Make It Happen. Hello and welcome to Pick My Brain. If you have a question, you can send it in to me at michelle@speakmichelle.com. You can send me questions on marketing, motivation, business, dealing with life and everything in between. I'd be happy to answer your questions on a future segment of the show, just like this. Today's question comes from Bernadette Almeida, who is asking me about hashtags. How do I use hashtags? How many hashtags is too many? And where do I use them in social media? I could probably do a whole half an hour show just on hashtags, though I think that conversation can get a little boring. So let me tell you two guiding principles on hashtags, and then we'll just wrap this one up really quickly, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that may pop up. The first thing that I will tell you is that hashtags work in some platforms but don't work in others. They all exist, but I actually don't recommend you use hashtags right now on Facebook. They claim they're hashtag friendly, but it actually just hurts in the algorithm. Hashtags are still prevalent on Twitter, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn, but each of them have different requirements. On Instagram, you can do between 15 and 20 hashtags. I'm going to give you an asterisk right here. We're going to come back to that. On LinkedIn, they don't recommend more than 4. And on Twitter, I really don't recommend more than 4 or 5, depending on your conversation. Otherwise, it looks like you're just hashtagging everything, and it is like hashtag spamming. So as you go in, if you're curious, I just keep up to date by following a few social media resources. One of them is the Social Media Examiner, but there's also a few social media experts that I follow on different platforms just to kind of see what the trends are. But you can also do a quick Google search, like hashtags Instagram 2022, hashtags TikTok 2022, and just make sure that you're using hashtags in the right way. I will say that if you're using a platform like Instagram, that most platforms are switching to more of a search engine optimization and or topic-based search platform over hashtags. Hashtags have done a good job of combining conversations and communities for many years, but they're really looking towards being more search-friendly and making sure that people are getting the exact content that they're looking for through their search bar. So now, just as much as you would research hashtags, I highly recommend that you're considering what your captions look like and how they're worded in a way that might meet the needs of people who are asking specific questions. Every social media platform is trying to stay relevant and trying to keep people on their platform, so they're using them a little bit differently. However, if you are using Twitter or Instagram, remember the biggest hashtags are not necessarily the best ones because those are oversaturated. It's very noisy. So I recommend that you do some research and find some ways to put hashtags that are coming from smaller or fewer amount of posts so that you can get your content seen in front of a more targeted group, in addition to cutting through some of the noise and clutter. So do some hashtag research. What we do is we find hashtags in different amounts. So we do less than 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to about 500,000, and then 500,000 plus. And we try to sprinkle some in our hashtag sets from each of those areas so that we're meeting a variety of content conversations and really kind of getting away from the 500,000 plus. I hope that's helpful as you consider different types of hashtags. But the last thing that I want to share, first, if you focus on platform, and second, if you focus on strategy, is that sometimes we can get distracted by hashtags and forget that the content sometimes will speak and do the work for itself. So spend as much time putting together great content as you do researching hashtags, and you'll find that they do really well in the algorithm. Thanks so much for sending in your question, Bernadette, and I look forward to seeing future questions from others on Pick My Brain. Today, we welcome a guest who has become a good friend of mine and somebody that I've had the opportunity to work with for the last year. Cheryl Johnson is with us. She is someone who has decades of experience in learning management and brings a lot of wisdom to the table. Now, with her focus on politics and helping communities find ways to work together to solve some of our biggest problems. Cheryl, welcome to Make It Happen.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am happy to have you here as well. I have really enjoyed our conversations over the last 10 months together and the ways that you show up in the world. I'm impressed by your courage, your commitment to your values, and your genuine willingness to make the world a better place and how you do that. And so I would love for us to just dive in. We're going to talk a little bit about cooperatives today. But before we do, is there anything that you want to share about your path and your journey that have gotten you here that you think might be helpful for our audience?
Sure. And I've loved working with Michelle. I think she's helped me clarify a lot of things over the last year as I've been trying to transition a little bit from working in the learning industry to providing learning solutions for helping people be able to work more cooperatively in their community. It was probably 2012. I started working for a national membership organization, and it's called Touchstone Energy. And that's how I got introduced to the idea of cooperatives. And I have to admit, I first fell in love with the people that I was working with. And there's over 900 electrical cooperatives throughout the country. And I was working with a lot of them to set up learning management and just learning solutions in general. And I absolutely loved working with the people. So then I started digging a little bit more into cooperatives and what they were. And as I did, I was talking to my friends and they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I'd tell them and they're like, oh, cooperatives, that's socialism. And I was like, really? I didn't think it was. So then I started digging in a little bit deeper to find out what cooperatives are. And the more I dug into it, the more I really found that it's absolutely 100% not socialism, but it's just bringing people together. I've always been interested in politics. I always tell people I started my earliest recollections is when I was 10 years old and I wanted to vote for Richard Nixon, but I wasn't quite old enough. And I don't come from a political family. I don't have a political history at all. So where this came from, I don't know. But I've always been that way. But I've really enjoyed I like to talk to people who think differently than I do and who believe differently than I do, and to try to find common ground. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to go with this new cooperative learning venture. How's that?
I love it. One of my favorite parts about you, Cheryl, is that I'm familiar with your views and your stances on many political and social issues. And yet I do feel like you're one of those people who will listen to the other side and tries really hard to make political conversations healthier and to have people be able to share their thoughts and opinions and beliefs in a way that makes it feel safe for everyone. And so before we dive into cooperatives, I'd love for you to share some of your thoughts and principles around the let's talk, not yell, and how we can, as Americans, navigate a tumultuous political environment while having different opinions from other people.
It's funny. I was just putting out this morning some of my social media memes and ads that I've been creating. And the focus of this week's postings, I guess you'd say, are all about communication. And, everybody's taken courses on communication and how to present your message in a better way. And all, there's 100 different classes you've taken on communication. But where I think my message is a little bit different is it's not about communication necessarily. It's not about presenting my message in a way that resonates with people. It's really about listening to other people. And I don't just mean closing your mouth and, politely nodding as you're, and then, we've heard of mirroring, like I'll say something, you say something back to make sure you heard it and understand it and all that kind of stuff. I really believe that at the core of meaningful communication in your personal relationships, in any relationships, and your communication with others is empathy, and really trying to understand where the other side is coming from, and not necessarily trying to push your ideas onto someone else. Because if I can't remember the exact saying, but basically, if you want someone to listen to you, you have to listen to them first. And I mean, truly listen to them.
Yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes the listening's the hardest, right? We have so many things we want to say that we forget about listening. And there have been a lot of times where I've approached conversations that may have started fairly turbulently, or maybe they got turbulent over time. And I thought to myself, the turning point was the point where someone decided not to listen anymore and just to talk, or to change an opinion, or to change minds. And I think that we all can do our part to open up communications in a way that make people feel like they are heard, not just kind of brushed past too. So I think you do a good job of that. Okay, so let's dive into cooperatives, and let's talk about, how did you first come up with this? Where did you first hear about it? And how can everyday humans start to think about ways that they can use cooperatives in their own lives?
I touched on briefly back in 2012 when I worked for this membership organization. And that's where I got introduced to cooperatives. And basically, we'll step back just a little bit. A cooperative is nothing more than people owning the product or service of the entity in which they are participating. That sounds a little clumsy, but if I explain where the cooperative movement started, well, I wouldn't say it started. It started in the late 1800s. Where it really got traction was in the early 1930s, 1920s, when electricity was first, being introduced into homes in particular. And of course, utility companies were fine building all the infrastructure for big cities because there was a lot of people. And it was, they could make money. Everybody wants to make money. And even if you can't make money, you at least want to be able to make enough money to provide the service that the utilities intended to provide. But that left people in rural America out of the picture because they didn't want to run all these telephone poles, or not telephone poles, but utility poles, I should say, to one or two people out in the middle of nowhere. So a whole lot of communities got together and decided that if they could form cooperatives. And they went back to the Rochdale principles that started in the 1800s or so. And right now there are over 900 electrical cooperatives throughout North America. That includes Canada and Mexico. And they provide electricity to rural communities. I live in a rural community right now, and I'm served by an electrical cooperative. And yes, similar to like if you think of yourself as a shareholder, because you get dividends, you invested, let's say you went on the stock market and you invested in, who knows, AT&T, and you became a shareholder. You get a little thing in the mail once in a while that says, here, vote, for your board members, but you have no say in how AT&T runs its business. A cooperative is different. You actually do. It's more on the local level, and you have more say. You are truly a shareholder in the business, and you can attend board meetings and, share your thoughts and ideas on how things should happen. And so that was on a grand scale. That's how one example of cooperatives. But then there's a lot more cooperatives that are much smaller and serve a whole different need.
Yeah. So when we first started talking and chatting about the work that you do, I thought to myself, I haven't heard of this very often. But then over the last 10 months, I can see places that now I know they were cooperatives, but I just didn't call them that, right? So the neighborhood garden that is, and lots of even urban communities, but we've got lots of different pockets, even in our suburban area in Utah, where we have communities who have come together to work together on a garden, and they share the crops, and they share the responsibility, and then they share the harvest when it's done. And while whether or not it's an exact cookie cutter of a cooperative, it's based on some similar principles. And in a business setting, I can see similar principles for HOAs, homeowners associations, where they're coming together and saying, "Hey, we're going to take care of landscaping and snow removal and have a pool, and everyone's going to pay into that so that can work, and then everyone gets the benefits of it." And again, maybe not an exact cooperative, but using some similar principles and ideas about how they work. As you look at the environment that we are in today, what are some of the suggestions that you have for people, whether in rural or suburban or even urban areas, to work together for a cooperative that could be beneficial to that community?
I'll start with an example in my community here. When I first moved out here, and it was only 2 years ago that I moved out into rural Virginia, where I live, there is, when I say there's no high-speed internet, when I first moved here, there's like no internet, period. So we're working off of a hotspot for a long time. Starlink finally did come rescue us a little bit here. But even still, we have a lot of issues. Every time it rains a little bit, Starlink goes out, and we still have a lot of issues with internet. So there's roughly 100 addresses in my community that are in the same boat we are. So everybody thinks of a cooperative, well, not everybody, but some people think of a cooperative as a business. You mentioned just community gardens. That's one example. This is one example. We just got together and said, hey, we're going to solve this issue. We're going to find a way to bring internet to our community. And we discussed, possibly setting up a business entity to do it. We ended up going and applying for a grant, to get internet. We're still in that process. We're still working that out. So that's just one example. Other examples that people think of. One of my favorite is there's a company called Pingree in Detroit, and they have a homeless problem, a big homeless problem. And it's cold in Detroit. It's not like in California where there's a homeless problem and people can live on the streets and not freeze to death. And most of those homeless people are veterans, unfortunately. And so a man decided he was just going to start making shoes, And so he got all of these homeless people together, and he set up a shop. And long story short, he now employs, I believe it's between 50 and 100 veterans, and it's a cooperative. These veterans not only work in this manufacturing environment, but they own it. They truly are owners of this business. And so there's just so many different ways you can go. And that's if you're looking at it from a business perspective. But what I'm trying to do right now is not necessarily, ultimately, if you want to set up a cooperative in your community and you want to know how to set up the business structure and do all that, I'm more than happy to help people do that. And that's kind of the pinnacle of my business. But there's 3 core tenets. What do you want to do personally? What do you want to do in your community? And what do you want to do as a business? So if all you really want to do is something personally, like, for example, our little fiber internet initiative, that's something I would consider borderline between personal and community. But I also teach classes on the Constitution, so at no cost, because I think people need to understand politically, what is our Constitution? Where did it come from? How does it govern us? And what is within its purview and what's not within its purview? And bringing people together, that's kind of on the political side of things, bringing people together so that we can all talk about how we want to structure our government, how it was structured, how we would like to structure it moving forward, and just getting people talking to each other and saying, well, this is what I like about it, and I don't like this about it. And if I want to change, things, then this is how I would change things. And we can work together and find common ground. So that's kind of the political and the charitable, I guess, if you want to call it that side of things.
Yeah, no, I like that. That also reminded me of an initiative that they were interested in doing in my town, in Provo. They were looking for resources, and the city kind of did this in a multifaceted approach. But the city said, hey, we want to make our community more bike friendly. We obviously have infrastructure issues where we can't expand roads much further without taking out lots more businesses and homes. And so they started to change some of our streets into being more bicycle friendly. But then they realized that you can change the streets all you want, but if people don't have bicycles, then maybe it won't encourage bicycle riding. And so there were some community members who got together, and I think they ended up forming a nonprofit, but they reached out in a similar collective and cooperative type of way at first, and started to get people together saying, hey, how can we help kids want to ride bikes? How can we help adults want to ride bikes? And it wasn't a city initiative at all. It was just some people who said, hey, there's some things that we can do. And they started employing kids and teaching them how to do bike tuning and change tires and how to take old bikes and make them feel new again. And so they found a way to provide some jobs. They found a way to provide some resources, and people could go get old bikes fixed and running again with mismatched tires, but tires that worked and were the same sizes or whatever. And I love the initiative that comes from that, and somebody having an idea. And at a core of whether it's changing something politically or finding ways to get internet or something in between, it starts with an individual who has an idea and who is willing and maybe even brave enough or crazy enough to say, I'm going to figure out how to make this work. And I'm going to invite other people to work with me. So if you have people, and I know we're getting close to being done here, but if you, what advice would you give to somebody who's sitting and watching or listening to the show and saying to themselves, well, I have an idea. I have this thing that I want to do in my community, or I want to bring this group of people together first. What do you recommend as next steps?
I would say your next steps are to find a place where you can meet people who have like-minded ideas. And I'll just give you a quick example. I was actually watching a documentary last night on it, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I love nonprofits, and I want to make another statement here is nonprofits, and I've worked with the IRS to write the training in all my background on setting up nonprofits. It is the paperwork is incredible. Yeah. Setting up a cooperative is much easier. But there was a church, and there's the community who was having a huge problem with overdoses of fentanyl. And so these churches got together. They formed a cooperative. Was it a legal entity? Was it formally a cooperative? No, it was a group of churches who, even though they disagree with each other from a theological standpoint, they all agreed that their community had a problem. So what they did was, we're a church. There are other churches in the community. And that's where I think what my membership site tries to do is to bring people together. You may have a church, your church may not think the same as another church. You may have totally divergent ideas on theology, but you all agree we have a fentanyl problem, and we believe at the core that Jesus Christ is the solution to the problem. And so it was just amazing. The documentary I watched was just amazing, and the number of people they've helped and how they've been able to grow. So I would encourage people not to stop at, I have an idea, but I can't find anybody like me that's trying to do something. That's one of the core tenets of my membership site, is to provide a ton of resources for free so that people can come and say, well, here's somebody else that's trying to do what I'm trying to do. These are people that are working in the same arena that I am. We don't have to live in the same community. We live in the community of the world. And thank goodness, with all the technology we have these days, our community doesn't have to be limited to our geographic zip code.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's what's so great is in the past, it was necessary because you had to do things close by and you didn't have access to resources. And now there's lots of resources that are available, and that just expands your ability to be able to get the solutions that they need. So I would love for you to share, how can people find out more about you if they have questions? What are your next big things coming up that people might be interested in? Tell us a little bit about you and how we can connect you with those in our audience.
Well, if you go to, it's called The Fifth Principle, number 5, thefifthprinciple.coop. That's where my website is. And at the bottom, there's a contact us page, and you just reach out to me, and I'll, with any questions, or, you're interested in my membership site and becoming a part of it. It's free. I just want to connect people. That's my main goal at this point, is getting people talking to each other, communicating, with empathy, and seeing where we go from there.
Awesome. We'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes so that you can click on them. But I highly encourage you, if you have had some ideas that have just percolated in your mind that have just piqued your interest, to reach out to Cheryl and chat with her, whether one-on-one or through her membership group, so that you can take it to the next level and see what next steps are there. One of the things that I love about Cheryl is her ability to be able to take a concept and make it understandable. So if it still feels confusing or you don't quite know and understand, Cheryl is absolutely a safe place. Also, if you're a seasoned expert and you've worked on some of these things before, but you need a new project, or maybe you're working on something bigger, Cheryl's expertise and experience is bar none. And so if you can find a great resource in her, whether you're just getting started or whether you're established in this area. So Cheryl, thank you so much for being on Make It Happen. And we wish you the best in all the things that you're doing, and look forward to having future conversations with you just like this.
Well, thank you. And just ironically, let's make cooperatives happen.
Yes, let's make cooperatives happen for sure. Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye-bye.
Okay, it's time for a few of my favorite things. We are getting ready for the holidays, and I am so excited, and it's time for me to expand my holiday t-shirt collection. So I found this gem. It's all very merry, and it makes me very happy, from Target. If you have other holiday shirts that you feel like I might like, you are welcome to send me those links. I will buy them all. Okay, I have an extensive holiday t-shirt collection. I'm not sad about it. I haven't seen a bag yet, but if you recall, last year, one of my favorite holiday treats was the Fannie Mae peppermint s'mores. It comes with the dark chocolate and the graham crackers and the marshmallows, all covered in dark chocolate that's a little bit pepperminty. That is my favorite holiday treat. But I'm also going to share with you this little gem. This is the Meta Power from doTERRA. I've been taking this for about 6 weeks. This is a collagen supplement. It comes with a few other things in the line, the Meta Power line, and I've liked and used them all. However, I have taken 3 or 4 different types of collagen supplements over the last 2 years, and this one is my favorite. I feel like this has been the best at helping me with my skin and wrinkles. I just feel like I'm doing so much better in that department, but I also feel like this is helping me with energy. And that's the only thing that has shifted in my supplement regime. And I have taken lots of supplements over the years. And I feel like I have energy and mental clarity. I feel like I can work at night past 8 p.m. I feel like I can get through days without needing a nap. And so I have been really impressed with how this has helped me. And I cannot say the same thing about every other supplement that I have taken. So while we're getting ready for the holidays, I'm excited to have the energy that's here with me. I've got the links for all of these in the show notes below, but these are a few of my favorite things. I just love that conversation with Cheryl. I feel like every time I talk to her, I learn new things. I feel more aware. As a America-loving lass, I am always interested in finding solutions that help make life better for me as a citizen, but also the people around me. And also, I hope that you'll be thinking about your business as well. We've had a lot of conversations back to back about who we are as humans, and we haven't talked a lot about business, but I also feel like that's really important. So thank you for investing in your time today and Make It Happen. I am honored for every every minute that you watch or listen to. And again, thank you so much for your comments and reviews. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thank you for being part of Make It Happen.